Collaborative members can address matters raised in pending proceedings generally, but should not speak to the specific merits of a pending contested proceeding. Thank you. I would now like to turn the meeting back over to the collaborative co-chairs, Chairman Mark Christie and Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission Chair Jim Houston.
Thank you, Cece. And we're going to start off with the Northeast country, part of the country, and Phil and Pradeep, Commissioner Bartlett and Commissioner Chattopadhyay. I don't know which one of you is going first, but feel free to jump in.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Houston, Chair Christie. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I just want to I'll make a few points, but I do want to just note that Pradeep and I have put these together sort of in consultation with our colleagues, but they are not intended to reflect a distinct view of NECPUC or the region per se, but rather sort of our thinking as we are approaching these issues. We're very fortunate in New England that we have the states have a very strong and positive relationship with ISO New England. We regularly meet with management, with staff, with the board of directors. We also are very engaged with the NEPOL stakeholder process. So,
Phil, could you just move the mic a little bit more toward you?
Closer.
Thank you.
Is that better?
That's better.
Right.
It's better.
I feel like echoing, but yeah, so we're very fortunate in the region to have a very positive relationship with ISO New England, with the stakeholders, and with each other, with the other states. And we've made a number of progress in a number of areas, but we did want to highlight a few where we think there's been some progress, but we could do more. First and foremost, we get a lot of criticism, or I hear a lot of criticism about the lack of transparency in the stakeholder process in New England. Folks who want to learn more about the work we're doing. This is becoming a bigger topic, I think, for policymakers, for advocates out in the community. And we need to make sure that they have confidence in the work that is being done on their behalf in the region. So the first recommendation from a governance perspective I would have is to open up all of our NEPOL stakeholder meetings to the public. Not for active participation per se, but to allow folks to see what's going on, whether it's a live streaming or people could show up to watch. That seems like an important way to help build trust and confidence in the work that's happening. Anytime we can let people in and sort of peek behind the curtain, I think it takes away some of the mystery or the concern about decisions being made in a back room. And they can really see the complexity of the issues we're dealing with and the thoughtfulness that I think all the stakeholders in the region engage and try to tackle those problems. Secondly, as I mentioned before, on resource adequacy, it's really important that the states work closely and build a strong relationship with ISO New England to make sure that if there are problems that are identified, that analysis is shared with the states in a timely way, in a consistent way, so that the states can take appropriate action. I think we're making some positive moves on this front. ISO New England has really started doing a lot more robust analysis. Every fall, they will be releasing, I believe it's a 5- and 10-year look ahead to give us a sense of how well we're doing, whether there are resource adequacy problems that are emerging. And I think having that as a regular process will enable the states to then have the conversation with ISO New England about what steps, if any, that we need to take in order to tackle these issues. Thirdly, if there are solutions that are identified to potentially address any resource adequacy issues, we need to make sure that there's a streamlined process for the study and review process so that if we need resources, we can get them interconnected quickly. If we need some transmission planning done very quickly, we've got to figure out how to get the resources on it so that the problems can be solved when the states are prepared to act. And I think that's just an important part of thinking holistically about the system and about resource adequacy and how we can all play a role in making sure it's fulfilled. And then finally, we wanted to mention, one of the challenges that we've been facing in the region that I think goes to sort of governance issue is the lack of transparency and lack of oversight of certain transmission spending, and in particular in the region, asset condition projects. We have made some very good progress on trying to develop a reviewer, an asset condition reviewer, that will help to hopefully provide some insights and some confidence to the states. And we just want to highlight that as a place where I think NESCO, ISO New England, the stakeholders have been working constructively, but also where there's room to keep pushing that to make sure that as we're spending more and more money of our ratepayers on transmission build, that there's real accountability and that people can have confidence in the work that we're doing.
Can you hear me? So I'm just going to build on the the first point, which is about transparency, and the last point. And my comments are going to be linking those two a little bit. So if you think about transparency, it's not just that you let folks come in and see what's going on. Some of the parties, certainly states, for example, in New England, the smaller states, we don't fully have the ability to process the information, even if we get it. So there is this need when you talk about transparency. It's not merely about providing the information; it's also having or giving the parties or states the ability to understand what's going on. And so, to that extent, I'm going to say that the FERC can probably, along with RTOs, play a role that would help smaller states to participate better. And that might mean that it needs resources. So it's not going to be a cost-free process, but that's very important for smaller states like us, for New Hampshire. And because again, I'm speaking from my own experience when I was participating in regional processes, uh, the, the NEPOOL process, and then you have the cost assessment. Those two pieces can sometimes be disconnected sufficiently that for smaller parties, it's hard to understand what's going on. So I'm kind of urging FERC as well as the RTOs to think outside the box and enable the kind of process that went in for the asset conditions process. The RTO ISO New England has been very helpful in figuring out a space where we can work together. Similar mindset is needed for even projects that are part of traditional transmission planning, and FERC goes through the approval process, looks at the cost later. So I think we may have to create a process that is more friendly for parties so that they are on the same level playing field, as opposed to, some parties will have deep pockets. They're able to participate better. So that issue also needs to be addressed as we look into the future. Thank you.
Okay, I've got to ask a question on the transparency. How do you two feel the dynamic is in the Northeast when working towards some of the transparency objectives that you seek with the Northeast ISO?
There's certainly been some progress. Several years ago, the states through NESCO put out a vision statement seeking a number of governance reforms, and there has been some progress. For example, ISO New England's board now has one open public board meeting a year. That could obviously be improved on. We'd like to see more transparency, but I do think there has been some efforts to make positive steps. We also have the Planning Advisory Committee, which is kind of the one committee meeting that is open to the public. And NESCO has long pushed for as many discussions as possible to happen in that forum so that there is public insight into the issues that we care about and that folks can see what's happening. The challenge right now, I think, is because there's so much spending happening, there's so much attention being focused on the electric sector now. I think there's a lot of advocates who just feel like they're worried about the decisions making. They're worried about the influence of various interests. And I think opening up more of the meeting so that they can see what's happening and see some of the technical discussion that's happening, seeing the thoughtfulness and the give and take of the various stakeholders in the region would be really valuable. And my understanding is that our stakeholder process is the only one in the country that is not open to the public. So it seems like we have plenty of models we can look to of where it's been successful and not interfered unduly with the work that needs to be done.
I will share similar sentiments. I'm going to also say that one will have to think about the NEPOOL process and then what the FERC does in terms of, determining what is just and reasonable in terms of cost. Those two processes probably should be looked at even more within the context of letting others also understand what's going on. So it's one piece is certainly allowing more stakeholders to participate in the NEPL process perhaps, um, but not necessarily as members, but understanding what's going on. But I'm also going to stress that there may be ways to include the RTO in the process of helping those parties that are not as financially capable to understand what's going on, and they can partner with us. And that's the kind of structure I'm hoping that we can get.
Let me ask a question follow-up. One of the themes that came through your statements, which I read, and you just indicated, was you're very concerned about the spend on what you call asset management, others call local projects, and that you don't have the resources at your commissions to thoroughly vet or evaluate these local projects. So you want the RTO to do it? Do you want an independent transmission monitor to do it? Who would do it at the RTO?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern are really the regional projects, the projects that are being shared across the region, as opposed to the purely local ones. Because I do think it's certainly in Maine, we have pretty good oversight of local projects in Maine. The challenge is if you're talking about a regional project, Maine pays 9 or 10% of that cost, and it's if we're making a decision, we can scrutinize it, but those decisions are being made in 5 other states as well.
Well, who do you want to do it at at ISO New England?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to
You're not
develop
doing
an
it. Who do you want to do it there?
Yeah, we're developing a sort of independent reviewer model, and ISO New England has agreed to sort of house it, and we're now working on some of the governance issues, how would they report to, and then exactly what the role would look like. But the idea is there being sort of an independent entity that we can then take the information to FERC or elsewhere if we're seeing problems arise.
And when do you think we'll see that filing?
I believe we're sort of at the beginning of what's likely to be a 2-year process, stakeholder process. But it will unfortunately expect it to be a little bit.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and ask a resource adequacy type of question and the intersection between resource adequacy and the region as well. We as a NARUC organization, we're blessed to have presentations directly from ISO New England, and your dynamic is a little bit different than some of the other regions of the country. How do you see that coordination on what you are doing in your state jurisdiction and how it intersects with the region as a whole?
Want to take it first, Sean? Let you go. Okay. I mean, I think the states, the states all have slightly different policies, but most of us have fairly aggressive clean energy policies that are driving a lot of the resource acquisitions by the states. We are, in general, I think, very committed to markets and want to figure out how to maximize the benefit we can get out of the wholesale markets and make sure that the decisions the states are making are building constructively on that and not unduly interfering with it. I think right now the resource adequacy outlook is good. We don't see immediate concerns on the horizon, but if they do pop up, what we've seen in the past is a feeling like we're lurching from crisis to crisis. That, geez, we have a problem, now we've got to rush to try to solve it. And so the states are scrambling, you have stakeholders, the ISO New England scrambling, and you don't feel like it's a really well thought out approach. And probably, or my concern is that we spend a lot more money trying to solve these problems because we're not proactive. And so what I've been advocating for, and I think there's real interest in the region for, is to have a regularized process so that once or twice a year, we're using analysis by ISO New England. States can offer some scenarios for further review and really look at what are the potential challenges that are coming at us with plenty of time for the states to, in a coordinated way, make decisions about whether it's acquiring resources, whether it's supporting a new transmission build, whatever the need is, to be done in a sort of thoughtful and cost-effective way, as opposed to this, what I feel like we've been doing for years, which is lurching from one crisis to another because of concerns around particularly winter reliability in the region. And so there's one fix after another, one expensive fix after another in an emergency situation, as opposed to part of a consistent analysis and plan. I want to make sure that every decision, every dollar we're spending is driven by really sound analysis and is the best option available for the region, as opposed to the only thing we can grab in an emergency situation.
sorry, there is a tension between what markets are supposed to do and what reality we have faced. So, I mean, it's understandable. This is not like the markets are organic. It's you have markets that have been created by human beings, and it's well-intentioned, all of that. But once in a while, we're dealing with these non-market issues, and we're trying to figure out how to solve a particular crisis. And what that means is that one might conclude that the cost is not being controlled enough. So again, coming from states like New Hampshire, where as a commissioner, I'm very pro markets. For me, having the ability, somebody helping us with the analysis and sort of saying, you know what, we can do a better job in terms of keeping a tab on costs and reducing it, even as we approach this field as a combination of market-based approaches and non-market interventions. So right now, with the changes happening in the electric arena, obviously it's not an easy problem to solve, but it's some sort of help coming in from some independent party will be good going forward.
Is this on? Oh, thank you so much. Fascinating conversation. I wanted to follow up, Chair Bartlett. You were kind enough to spend some time with us in Washington D.C. Earlier this year, and I just wanted to ask. One observation I have from your comments and from working on some of the things that ISO New England has filed is I observe incredible success in the region on planning transmission that you all need jointly and figuring out cost responsibility and getting good buy-in for the siting. I just wonder, as you are now considering resource adequacy together, I hear, I just wonder if you have more thoughts about what that looks like. I hear the need for analysis, and as someone steeped in a client of those data analysis, I agree with that and support you getting that information from ISO. But what does the next step look like? Let's say there's something that the region thinks they need. Have you any thoughts there?
Yeah, so I mean, a couple of examples, kind of the way I'm thinking about this is, the states are already doing a number of procurements, right? They're looking at different kinds of resources they want to bring on the system. If we were doing analysis that showed, look, we may have a resource adequacy challenge, if we had a significant amount of additional storage on the system, that would really make a difference. In the states, it's in sort of their bucket of things to procure is storage, right? So they could say, okay, how do we now tier sort of our RFPs to get this on? Maybe we move up some of those investments sooner. So I think it could help inform the states as they are going and seeking to bring on new resources to meet their climate goals. Another way I think this could be helpful, for example, if we were to see, we're trying to build up the resources in Northern Maine, the onshore wind resources. We know there's about 3,000 megawatts up there. We have kind of a plan to go get 1,200 megawatts. If we were to know that there was a resource adequacy problem coming at us in 2040 and having another 1,500, 2,000 megawatts of onshore wind from Northern Maine would help to solve that, then the region can make decisions about, okay, how do we want to invest in the transmission to unlock those resources? Or another example could be, geez, we're seeing a resource adequacy challenge. A good way to solve that could be increased interconnection with one of our neighbors. And so you could prioritize that and move the ball forward. So I think it's really make sure that if when you understand the problem, look at the various tools that ISO New England has, that the states have, and figure out then how to pull the various levers in order to avoid that resource adequacy challenge, as opposed to just waiting and getting ourselves into a sort of an RMR situation, which feels like where we would be headed if we're not, I think, being very thoughtful and doing a 5 to 10 year look ahead.
Commissioner Pertek.
Thanks. Yeah, I just following up on that last piece there, Phil. I think that really comes down to the accountability piece too, right? Like who is actually accountable for that resource adequacy and making sure that you are accurately planning and getting the right right forecasts in place. And I think that accountability has caused some, I don't know, blame issues, I guess, maybe occasionally, who to blame when something goes wrong. So, RTOs do have much more diffuse accountability structures, but it's oftentimes us as state regulators or other state leaders, or sometimes federal regulators who receive that outcry when capacity prices skyrocket, or when there's a resource adequacy issue, or when there's a reliability issue. How are you looking at that in the Northeast, and like how are you thinking about how to ease those tensions and move that conversation more towards collaboration between the states and RTO partners and our federal partners? And how are you trying to solve that, and how are you trying to move that more towards collaboration rather than blame?
When I started, in this job and thinking about resource adequacy, the states clearly decided to rely on the wholesale markets through ISO New England for resource adequacy. So I think I came into discussion thinking, ISO New England is ultimately responsible for resource adequacy. I think where I have kind of evolved over the last several years is understanding that, recognizing the fact that if the lights go out, it doesn't matter where the formal lines of accountability are, we're all going to be, we're going to plenty of blame coming our way. So it's important, I think, for all of us to sort of lean into these problems. And if there is an issue, figure out, okay, I think the way I look at it is first and foremost, we should be designing the markets to achieve resource adequacy to the maximum extent possible. So the markets should be, the first responsibility is trying to get that right. And then secondly, I think the states then need to look at where there are places where ISO New England cannot act because of limitations on their authority, that the states may need to step in certain situations. And again, you don't want to be interfering with the markets. I think we want the markets to be sort of the centerpiece of resource adequacy, but you also don't want the lights to go out because of a market failure that you saw coming at you, or because of a resource constraint that was unavoidable.
What I would add is that even when states somehow determine, okay, we have a role now because the markets aren't really doing what it was supposed to do. I'm not at I'm still hoping that we can have a conversation on how the states can come in again through market processes. Okay, that's one aspect. The second piece I'll mention is really based on what you just pointed out. Yes, accountability in everything we do, ultimately, it's like we are the ones who face the brunt, okay? So the process should be such that we have confidence in working together and having the ability to understand what's going on, and not the parties sort of saying, for example, oh, we don't have the ability to do anything. It's really your problem. Our task was this, we did it. Sorry, things are turning out to be bad. It's really, we are at a point where we have to figure out how to improve the interactions and allow parties that are not as, they don't have deep pockets to be part of the process and help. There's different ways to think about the markets as well. It's not just what the ISO New England is doing. Markets can come in from other ways too. So I'm just keeping it broad enough. That's what I'd say.
Any other final observations? We have about 35 seconds. Rob, am I getting that clock right?
All right, well, let's move on to the, thank you all very much for that presentation on New England. Our next region we're going to hear from is the Midwest, Mark, and it'll be Chair Jim Houston of Indiana and Commissioner Catherine Paratic of Michigan. So,
well,
yours.
I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record because I had the blessing of appearing before FERC in the 1st of June at a technical conference as well. The big point that I wanted to emphasize is on the resource adequacy side. Catherine's going to cover more of the governance type of questions in her opening remarks. We in Indiana believe in cooperative federalism. We put together a general administrative order several years ago to get direct feedback from our RTOs on resource adequacy to or every CPCN that's brought before us to get that kind of color, to get that kind of insight. We applaud the FERC on what you guys have done with seasonal accreditation. We applaud the FERC on what you've done with the queue process as well. It's an order that's passed, so I can't say that compliment, correct? Okay, that's all I'm supposed to say, but thank you.
If you're thanking us, you can talk about whatever you want.
That is a big thank you. But I also want to say that on the seasonal accreditation side, we modified our general administrative order to make sure that now that we have seasonal accreditation in the MISO footprint, that we get that additional color from the CPCNs that are brought before us as well. And to me, that's a good example of the way it's supposed to work. Our hope is that from a resource adequacy perspective, we get every bit of information from the RTO, whether they feel confident about the way the statutes are written or not. They need to be able to tell us what they need to get their job done in moving electrons throughout the footprint, and then to be able to share electrons effectively throughout the country when it's needed economically or when it's needed for service delivery. So with that, I will turn it over to Catherine, and Catherine's going to talk about governance.
Thank you, Chairman Houston. And thank you, Chairman Christie, as well for the invitation, and all of the FERC and NARUC members for the opportunity to be here. I do have a prepared statement, given that I only have 2.5 minutes to get through this. I have a lot to say, and if I don't have a script in front of me, I will wander. So in your opening comments, Chairman Houston, you rightly emphasized the issue of resource adequacy. And in my brief time today, I'm planning on focusing on the other half, on RTO governance. And though I look forward to engaging both closely on both of these very closely connected issues during our discussion. So I'm a Michigan commissioner. Michigan is in both MISO and PJM. And the MARC region as a whole contains parts of MISO, PJM, and SPP. I happen to be an OPSI board member, but in preparation for this meeting today, I reached out to all commissioners in the MARC region for their input to ensure that I'm representing our region, the MARC region, accurately. And I got a lot of responses. There was a lot of input and a lot of recommendations for what to talk about or what not to ask for today. I spoke also with commissioners who were very deeply involved in both the MISO and SPP RTOs and have incorporated their thoughts here as well. So I'll start by saying that RTOs have served us very well for decades. Their structure, while not perfect, has supported reliability, it's supported market development and coordination across large regions. But the energy landscape has changed dramatically since these governance structures were first established. We're now seeing significant load growth, changing energy mix with new generation attributes, an expansion of state and federal public policies, and interconnection queues that are increasingly clogged. These shifts raise serious questions about whether the existing RTO governance structures remain well suited to today's challenges. The other MARC commissioners that I spoke to in advance of this meeting expressed general satisfaction with the state input process in both MISO and SPP. But that was not the case in the very diverse, member-driven PJM. In PJM, the state's perspectives, and by extension, the customer's needs, are not adequately represented. States don't have Section 205 filing rights, as Chairman Christie mentioned. We do not have a meaningful vote on major decisions. During their formation, utilities were the architects of RTOs, so it's no surprise that governance models tilt in their favor. At least in PJM, state and ratepayer interests are not prioritized or even fully considered, which is a foundational governance issue. It's important that the RTOs are not captured by one particular member interest. A strong backstop, whether it's FERC, an empowered and educated board, or a management team with more authority, is necessary to ensure an independent RTO can remain an independent RTO. Board autonomy is another concern. While most of the board members are highly qualified, these board members receive 100% of their training from the RTOs that they oversee. which might be a conflict that limits fresh perspectives. We need more diverse training for board members, greater representation of ratepayer interests, and a rebalancing of influence. Voluntary membership allows transmission owners to leverage threats to exit if outcomes don't go their way. Decisions should be more transparent, votes should be fully public, meeting minutes should be accessible, and there must be a clearer representation of all stakeholder needs, especially the customer. And states should have a say in setting the level of resource adequacy that we're planning for. Major proceedings need to have a formal notice and opportunity for comment, and the product that each state expects from the market should be defined and respected. So that's a lot to tackle, but I think we have the right people here to start the conversation. So thank you.
All right. Great openings. Anybody have questions? I think no one had coffee today, but I did. I had a lot of coffee. So I always do. I'm going to start with the questions. And I'm going to go to Catherine. But I'm going to ask you about MISO, which I thought your PJM comments were spot on, but we'll go to MISO. Would you describe how does I've always been sort of envious of you and NSBP of your filing rights, the 205 rights in MISO. It's not total, but could you sort of explain what filing rights you do have in the states have in MISO?
Sure. It's not direct filing rights. In SPP, they do have direct filing rights. In MISO, it's not as direct, but they have a much bigger input through multiple different venues into what is actually filed before FERC. I'm not our OMS representative, so I don't have,
Right.
Maybe Chairman Houston, you probably have a better answer for exactly how it happens in MISO.
Well, what I would say is that I don't sit on either one of them because, and this is probably a comment that somebody else is going to make because I saw it in the bullet points, but we have two commissioners, one on PJM and one on OMS as well. And the stakeholder process is so involved on the OMS side. I think that they feel like that they can get comments through. Now, the flip side on the governance side is the board orientation. I think that there is some concern about the independence and training. So I agree with what Catherine was talking about on that side.
Yeah, Commissioner Bartlett, Chairman Bartlett.
Yeah, so your comments about the states having a greater role in determining the level of resource adequacy that should be planned for. How would you envision it? Would it be sort of states feeding in certain information like expected demand growth, or would it be states sort of collaborating on sort of whatever that target number is needed to be out in the future?
Yeah, so maybe I'll describe how it works in Michigan right now, and this is both on our MISO and PJM side. The way that we're vertically integrated. Well, we're 90% vertically integrated. We have a 10% retail choice in Michigan. So for the 90%, we require capacity demonstration that is that's 4 years out. And that at the state level. So at the state level, we require all of our load serving entities to demonstrate their sufficient capacity 4 years into the future. And that capacity is set, like that number is set in collaboration with the RTO. So the RTO actually provides input to us at the commission to then determine what that capacity number should be that those load serving entities then need to demonstrate their capacity for. So maybe that's one model. I think another model would just be, directly with the RTOs themselves, having a stronger seat at the table, whether that is 205 filing rights or whether that is the ability to sit on committees like at the RTOs or chair committees, like they have that opportunity in MISO, and they don't in PJM, and I think having that just additional seat at the table and input, I think would create better outcomes where both the states and the RTOs would be able to have more of that information about what's happening more at the local level and what's happening at the broader regional level. Because the point of an RTO is so you don't have to do everything yourself, right? Like it's so you have that regional coordination and you're able to draw on the resources that exist in other states.
I'm going to answer it a little bit differently from a resource adequacy standpoint, because I think this is one of the big challenges moving forward on load forecasting at the regional level, at the national level, and it's one of the things that I brought up at the technical conference in June as well. It's great to see all of that engagement at the national level about what stakeholders expect to see in the country as a whole. It's great to see it forecasted out at a regional level, but where the rubber hits the road is at the state level for actually meeting that resource adequacy need with the power and the responsibility that the individual states have at meeting their obligation to serve customer. And we're blessed and cursed at the same time to be living in the most dynamic period of time in history. It may not be hitting New England the same way with hyperscalers, but it's hitting us in Indiana in a big, big way. And I know it is hitting elsewhere in the country at the same time. And how does one project or forecast load moving into the future? I think is a serious issue that national and regional and state people need to take a look at because of the intersecting roles that we all have in meeting that obligation to serve. It's incredibly important. And just as Chair Christie talked about here, you get one hyperscaler that comes in with a gigawatt load and you're a 4 gigawatt system. That's an incredible amount of load being put onto one particular system at a time, let alone if you have 3 of them hitting your state at the same time. How do you wind up injecting that kind of economic development into a futures model that never based it on or any kind of a history before? I think that is an enormous challenge for both the RTOs, the states, and the country as a whole. So Phil, I don't know if that's what you were asking about or not, but I couldn't help myself but go sideways a little bit.
Anybody else? Oh, yeah. Commissioner Barrow, Pennsylvania, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Just want to tag on to something that Commissioner Paratek just said. The point of an RTO is so that the states don't have to go it alone, don't have to make a lot of these very thorny decisions on their own. The point of the RTO is efficiency, it's power pooling, it's expertise when it comes to the engineering and the build out and all of that. And one thing I have noticed, especially for a state like Pennsylvania, that is restructured, and we restructured and we said, here, PJM, you handle resource adequacy. And we stepped back because we had all the confidence in the world that things would be managed as they should. But now that, and we were able to do that because at the time the RTO was formed, we were long on supply. We had very large fossil units, we had large nuclear units, and there was an expectation that that amount of supply would continue going forward. Obviously, things have changed, the resource mix has changed, and as we delve back, as we, the state of Pennsylvania, delve back into the details of the RTO, one of the things that we're realizing is that when it comes to our state's expertise in this, we've got a long way to go. And the reason we've got a long way to go is that in the years that we stepped away, the RTO became a behemoth. We went from the original P, the J, the M, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, and now we've got almost 5 times as many states and state policies trying to work together on the state staffing side. And I think this is a good time to emphasize this. We've got a lot of room to catch up. We're doing it. We're making a valiant effort. But I'm thinking about last week, just last week, we had the BRA results. We had a big ELCC meeting. We had quad review. We also had a jam-packed markets and reliability meeting. And the amount of staff time that it takes to get into the weeds of all those things happening in one single week after week, month after month, cannot be overstated. So we ask for as much collaboration with the RTO. And when we raise issues, they are responsive, but it's going to take time for the states to get up to that level of expertise. Because at the same time, we do have other jobs, setting rates, et cetera. So I just wanted to mention that.
Any follow-up to that? Yeah, Commissioner.
I'm just going to make a very general comment. When we think about this process, trying to improve the governance, we should also be mindful of, given what's going on nationally, that there may be a need for FERC and the other RTOs, all of the RTOs, to work together and think about, resource adequacy more globally, so that you have a better outcome in terms of cost. I mean, if we start thinking just individually about RTOs and regions, given what's going on in the national scale, it maybe ultimately in the future, we might say we actually took the wrong path. So just wanted to make that comment as well.
Yeah, can I just follow up on one thing that that Vice Chair Barrow said. The staff time that it takes to participate in these RTOs is astronomical. Like it was shocking when I joined the commission 4.5 years ago. I was really surprised that we had and I have some of my staff here with me today who do this on a daily basis. And thank you, Eric, for everything that you do, because I don't know how they keep up with it all. Like it's really time consuming, and it's really complicated, and it's changing. The rules change, the format of everything changes, more things get added, nothing ever gets taken away. And it's really difficult to keep up with this from the state level, right? Like if the well-funded organizations that are members of these RTOs have lots of money to spend on participating in these, they can hire additional people, right? Like we have a limited staff, and we have a limited budget to be able to participate. And that causes a real challenge for us to, even though we have, some pathways for input, and even more now, especially, thanks to the 1920 order. It's really, the resource limitations are real.
Yeah, let me endorse those comments just from experience. And when Virginia went into PJM, let our utilities go in as 2004, and we had no idea, because no one really knew what these creatures were at that stage, totally. And had no idea that the staff time it would take, our staff, Virginia staff, to just try to figure out and follow what PJM was doing. I mean, you don't have time. Your staff are, basically swamped from Monday to the next Monday without a weekend, trying to do your own work. And so when you're trying to keep up with, I think you referred to PJM as a behemoth, trying to keep up with just what's going on with your own staff, it's almost impossible. I would say the single, probably most important thing that we did in in PJM was we set up OPSI, the organization of PJM states, early on. And most importantly, we were able to get a tariff change to fund dedicated staff for OPSI. I don't, I don't think you can possibly, that any of the big RTOs, that from a state standpoint, you can possibly protect your interests and your consumers' interest and your state's interest without having dedicated staff. And if we hadn't gotten the great staff at OPSI set up and funded separately, and I know there's multi-state RTOs that don't have dedicated staff. And I mean, I don't know how it works. I don't know how you can possibly do it. I think your points are absolutely, if you look at governance, and one of the big things on governance, I think that's got to be one of the big things is having dedicated staff for each RTO whose job is to work for the states. Because you can't dedicate full-time staff members to go do this. Yeah. Let me ask you a question. And Kim, I'm going to have a question for you when we get to MACRU, because you dove in big time on PJM. So we'll save it for the MACRU. But let me ask you, Catherine, because I was shocked when you said Michigan. I knew you were in PJM and MISO. I didn't know you were in SPP. Is that because of
Mark
You're
is,
talking about the region.
Mark.
Oh, okay.
Mark is in SPP and
Okay.
Michigan is not.
okay? I think you'd get the prize for 3 RTOs. I thought maybe the UP, a little corner, was in that because of minutes. But anyway, so here's my question. On governance, and you guys are in MISO, so I'm going to ask you about MISO, and it goes to you too. Both of you are in MISO. Indiana's another split personality. So what would you do if you had one thing that you could change in MISO governance for the states? What would it be that you think would improve the ability of the states in MISO, and we'll get to PJM, to more effectively represent states and your consumers, which is who you're representing and who you and your interests of your state? What would you do? What's the one thing?
So I'm actually, it's not directly for the states, but I think it's one of the things that you could do the most to help the states. And that's the board education. Something I mentioned in my opening comments is that all of the board members of all of these RTOs pretty much get 100% of their training from the RTOs that they govern. And those I mean, it makes sense, right? Like who else knows all of the ins and outs? Like these are extremely complicated structures and extremely complicated and high stakes things that they are responsible for governing. So they need to, that should absolutely be part of it, but they should also be getting their education from other places as well. And so they can then better represent the state's interest and not just the voices that have the biggest influence over the RTO.
Okay. And
I'm going to answer it a little bit differently, but it's based on some that I mentioned in the opening as well. In our attempt to involve cooperative federalism is to get pure, unadulterated feedback directly from the RTO. And that includes MISO and PJM about that intersection role. We're in charge of resource adequacy at the state level. But as it is emerging, that is a big deal at the regional and national level as well. And we need that kind of feedback. And frankly, the policeman for the RTOs is right here in the room, FERC. So if you were asking me, I agree with what Catherine said about the training on the board side of the equation, but
board, you mean the MISO board?
Yeah, but I agree with that. But I would emphasize that complete feedback on the CPCN processes that the states are involved in, that we understand fully the implications. And you've already done things. I've complimented the seasonal accreditation, complimented the queue process. That's as far as I'll go, CC, but complimented FERC on that. But I would say getting that unadulterated feedback. And what I mean by that, I think the system itself is going to need more dispatchable and controllable characteristics and attributes going forward to make sure that that number one responsibility for reliability is maintained. I think accreditation will go a long way, but I think that there's probably going to be need more in the future, and that would be my invocation.
Okay, a little bit more. I'm trying to process this. So more specifically, what role that you want the RTO to do? I'm trying to figure out what
Well,
exactly.
Candidly,
You
we're,
mentioned CPCN.
Yep.
You do the CPCN.
we do the CPCNs, but understanding how that CPCN affects the region
Oh,
and the country, I think is an important characteristics for state policymakers and state regulators to understand as they are making decisions about the CPCN process.
can MISO come and testify in your CPCN proceedings and tell you that?
They can, but as you talked about earlier, it's that odd bake. There's no region in the Constitution of the United
I know.
States. It's that odd characteristic
Right.
that does not compel anybody. We can't compel as a state MISO testimony or PJM testimony. They can offer it. And so the plea would be for you to intone to those to participate in that process with testimony if possible.
Well, I will tell you from experience, we had PJM come and testify in CPCN proceedings for regional transmission projects. Very, very valuable testimony. PJM never bucked at that. I mean, and so I think the new thing you might be introducing is whether the RTO would testify in a CPCN for a generating project, for a generating unit, and how that would affect.
I think that's a good idea.
Well, why don't you ask them to come testify? You could, heck, send them a
The
subpoena.
only way that we can do it structurally is to ask those who applied before us to ask them.
Interesting. Okay, that's an interesting idea. I would think they'd want to come testify. But anyway, that's not. I've seen them testify in transmission cases, but that's a new one generation. But it would be helpful, that information, wouldn't it? Okay. Any other questions on Mark? No. If not, I think it's time for us to
Move on. One more before the break. And I'm going to turn it over to Pennsylvania and Ohio for MACRU. Kim, I didn't check with you or Dennis on who was going first. Both of you had some observations in there and we already started touching on some of them. So Commissioner Barrow or Commissioner Dieters, you're on.
Thank you. Thank you. So Commissioner Dieters from Ohio and me, Kim Barrow from Pennsylvania, we are representing MACRUC and our individual states, of course. So I think some people might still be asking, why are we tackling governance when resource adequacy is the biggest topic that any of us is facing right now? And it's not that it might seem counterintuitive, but it's not. And the reason why it's not is because this resource adequacy issue that we are facing, we cannot come up with a durable, and I do emphasize durable solution for it unless we change, fix, adapt the governance structures in the RTOs. And speaking just for, of course, I'm just familiar with PJM mostly. So that's what I'm going to focus on. So the governance structures in PJM came about at a time when we were long on generation supply. We obviously are we're not there anymore, not for the midterm or the long term. We're looking at shortages. So rules are created based on the reality at the time that they are created. The reality right now is a lot different than when PJM was formed. So the rules, the governance rules, need to change. They can't be intractable, or we're not going to dig ourselves out of this quicksand that we find ourselves in. That's the first thing, is that governance rules cannot be orthodoxy. They have to adapt to reality. They have to adapt to, and the RTO, frankly, has to adapt to the changes in the states that formed the RTO in the first place. So that's the basis. And the second thing I want to say is RTOs are good. never let it be said that I am not a fan of them. They bring efficiency, competitive markets, um, bring down costs for all of my ratepayers and ratepayers in the region. And I think it would not be a good thing to get rid of this market construct that we have created. Can we simplify some of the rules? Absolutely. Can we make the market construct more responsive to the states which formed it in the first place? Absolutely. When it comes to governance, governance choices can impede or they can facilitate how we get out of the resource adequacy problem. And now when we have a variety of states with different and very fragmented state policies, governance becomes more important than ever. When it comes to those fragmented state positions in PJM, we've got vertically integrated states, we've got restructured states, we have exporters, we have importers, we have states that are actually, pretty close to being balanced when it comes to resource adequacy. And so there's a tension in decisions around resource adequacy because of that fragmentation, but it actually doesn't fall as much along vertically integrated versus restructured lines as you might expect. Pennsylvania, by far, we're the largest exporter. We're exporting 20 to 50% of peak load at any given time. Virginia, which is vertically integrated, imports 7 to 30% of peak load at any given time. And Maryland, which is restructured, imports anywhere 0 to 40% of peak load at any given time. I have no criticism for any state about their policies. Those are their sovereign choices when it comes to state policy. And I'm not one that will speak on that. The good thing about an RTO construct and a market construct, and we see it where we are today, is that the markets can locate generation in the least cost manner where needed. And that is inevitably going to result in some states exporting, some states importing. But that is not a bad thing. I have some ideas about where my RTO needs to go in order to meet the needs of its states that I'm quite happy to share with you. But first, I'm going to touch on the question about what governance change I would like to see made in PJM. So, and it has to do with voting.
What?
Voting and voting rights. So New England, I believe, has the jump ball voting rights, right? And I think that is responsive to its states. There's that. And then across the country, we've got CAISO, where the stakeholders aren't voting. They have a process where the stakeholders have ample opportunity to inform the vote. But at the end of the day, they're not voting. And in a different way, that is also very responsive to the state. So that's my answer to you on that.
First of all, thank you, Chair Christie and Chair Houston, for convening this. This has been a tremendous opportunity for states like Ohio, who fully rely on their RTO to have their voice heard, when I think we're in a position where we don't have jurisdiction on most issues, resource adequacy being the main issue. Vice Chair Barros' comments on the rules of the road when our RTO was formed, changing, and layer on the challenges with load growth, the resource adequacy crisis that we're hearing from NERC. We need to take a hard look at governance. The PGM structure with a large membership where you've got supermajority rules that drive a lot of the major decision-making should be of great concern to all states, but specifically states like Pennsylvania and Ohio have given the resource adequacy keys to their RTO. I think there's a lot of discussion that needs to be had on long-term solutions. PJM has been transparent, and I think that FERC the FERC commissioners should take credit for the engagement that we see from PJM because FERC is listening to states, and PJM knows that they need to listen to us as well. But to Chair Bartlett's point, I think that a lot of the decisions that have been made are made without transparency, and they're reactive. It seems like we've gotten to a position where we've got major issues in the RTO that are with quick responses that may not be long-term and sustainable. The two that come to mind are the RRI, which was a stakeholder process, I guess a pilot to get some generation online in a quicker fashion. But then we had a reactionary response to 206 from one of our states that put a collar on our capacity market. Those are not long-term sustainable solutions.
I'm sorry, can we move on? Thank you.
I'm sorry.
From those two.
Oh yeah, I'll stop talking. So we end up getting in a position where we're responding instead of long-term planning. And I think that's the challenge in governance when we have states who are relying on PJM RTOs in that sense. So there are some quick solutions we can make. Obviously, there's been a push to have some state representation on the board. We've been given certain controls in transmission planning. The states have. I think that's a great step forward as it relates to both planning and cost allocation. But the long-term solutions need to come with a recognition that we're planning for, a sustainable grid. And from a resource standpoint, when we're talking about constant changes to our market, which we've relied upon to incentivize new generation, I think we need to rethink how we come together as states along with PJM to have a conversation about what governance will look like in the future.
Well, let me follow up if no one else is. I want to drill back down on what both of you said about changes to PJM's governance. And Kim, you talked about voting and you referenced New England. I'd love to hear from Chair Bartlett, both our New England reps. I've always sort of been not totally up on top of how the jump ball process. Is that what you're referring to, Kim? Could you all just walk us through what I know it's got what was it, NECPUC, NEPOOL, and you got like 3 acronyms up there. And
it's through NEPOOL. So it's not the states, it's through NEPOOL. So if
Can you bring the mic closer to you?
if there's a proposal that's coming from MISO New England and the stakeholders were to vote for an alternative, then that could be put before FERC on equal footing so that that's where the jump ball comes from. But it's through the stakeholder process.
you got NESCO, and NESCO is the states, but it's not necessarily state regulators, right? It's governor appoints NESCO, right?
That's right. And NESCO and the states don't have a vote at NEPOOL. We attend, we engage, we advise, we cajole, but ultimately it is the stakeholders.
But you obviously have votes through NESCO because that is state appointed, right?
We take positions, but during the formal stakeholder process at NEPOOL, the states don't vote. So we weigh in, we ask questions, we offer our views, but ultimately it is the stakeholders themselves that vote.
So Kim and PJM, we have OPSI obviously, and OPSI is the state regulators. We don't have a NESCO equivalent. That would be a governor appointed entity. So Is that the kind of thing you'd like to see when you say a jump ball type arrangement like New England or something unique to PJM?
Yes, that is, I think it would be a lot more, it would give the states a larger voice. So OPSI does a great job on
Right.
staying on top of the issues and
Right.
making filings and such. But when going through the stakeholder process at PJM, there needs to be a way that we can be a lot more um, real-time interactive and have the states heard,
We the states.
we the states,
Gotcha. Okay.
right?
Mr. Chang.
Thank you very much for your presentation and discussion. Thank you for all the other panelists. I have a follow-up question very closely to what Chair Christie asked. And I've always been curious about this in New England context as well. So it's interesting to hear your comments about PJM, which is, it sounds to me that the states would actually want to have a voice and not just in engagement, which is, of course, of course, the states want to be engaged in particular resource adequacy, but I also hear on transmission planning and cost allocation. But focusing on resource adequacy, which is one of the main topics today, how, aside from engagement, what are you thinking today? Are you discussing with PJM, for example, about potentially allowing states to have some kind of a vote in one of the processes, or are you thinking the jump ball process, which is sort of a need pool, not a state option? Would that be? But it doesn't mean it has to be a NEPO type of structure, right? So you could have some kind of a state voice in a jump ball, I suppose. What are being considered now, and what do you think the steps are in sort of working with PJM in getting what the states feel like they can come up with? And I also want to say that in recognizing that there's so many different states with different policies, and and my experience in New England is, even in, I'll say, like-minded states, it's actually pretty challenging to have the states have, say, one vote or one jump ball position. But how are you thinking about all these things? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So at this point, this is just me thinking, as far as the states in a cohesive manner presenting options to the RTO. As far as I know, that's not really happening, and it is my hope that this meeting today will kind of jumpstart and give some guidance about possibilities, about where this discussion can go. And the reason I jumped on why I mentioned New England is it seems like a pretty elegant solution without having 14 different states have to reach agreement on every single little thing in order to get things moved through the RTO stakeholder process. And the reason I also mentioned the CAISO process, where the stakeholders don't have voting rights, is because currently today the states are outgunned. We are outspent, we're outmatched when it comes to being heard at the RTO. So the solution is give us a greater voice or level the playing field where none of us have stating rights. I don't know if that's like taking your marbles and going home, but I think it would afford a greater level of independence to RTO, to the board, if they were not so beholden to the stakeholder process and the membership. So it's just two completely diametrically opposed ways of solving the problem. But I think that either one could work, but we haven't delved into it as a membership as yet.
Yes, and Vice Chair Barrow's comments on the diversity of states at PJM, presents a challenge. We do have vertically integrated states and states like Ohio and Pennsylvania. There's states that have very ambitious carbon targets, and finding the right mix there, from a state's standpoint will be a challenge. I do think that there are solutions where we can put some controls back to the PJM board, where they will have some 205 filing rights that will relieve some of the pressure on the states that are sweating the resource adequacy side and the increasing costs of transmission in the PJM footprint. But a solution that gives a jump ball scenario with whatever organization would come out is welcome. And we know this conversation needs to be had. Credit to Vice Chair Barrow and Commissioner Paratek, who are working governance issues in PJM aggressively. I think we'll continue to have the conversation.
Commissioner Paratek.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that a little bit too, Vice Chair Barrow. I thought I think it's a really good point and exactly what we should be talking about. And building on the way that the Northeast does it. So SPP has direct 205 rights, right? Like the RSC can file directly their own proposal. OMS, and MISO, it's a little bit different. And I think this kind of gets to your question earlier too, Chairman Christie, is that OMS can propose a different methodology or changes to whatever MISO proposes. And then MISO can then decide whether or not to file that OMS proposal on their behalf, or they can choose not to. But either way, they need to respond to OMS in writing. So it's not so much a direct jump ball provision where they can propose something like that is directly in contrast and file it directly, but they can ask MISO to file on their behalf, and then MISO can decide whether or not to do that. All of the MARC commissioners who I talked to who are part of OMS seemed to be fairly comfortable with that and the way that process works, and felt like they were accurately represented by MISO, even though MISO does ultimately have that choice whether or not to file on their behalf. Have you considered that model at all, or any ideas or thoughts around whether that would be sufficient in PJM?
I actually think that could work for PJM as well, the SPP model.
Sorry, I meant the MISO model, but
sorry.
yeah, but the SPP model is great. Yeah.
Yeah. Any of them could work. I think any of them would be an improvement.
I'm going to ask the resource adequacy question, not to put you guys on the spot, but Commissioner Barrow, you particularly pointed out some very wide import-export discrepancies within the PJM footprint. Are you picking up on policy changes at a state level that will deal with that export-import challenge?
I'm hearing rumors. So the good thing about, and I said this before, the good thing about the RTO construct, the market construct, is that it is flexible enough to have certain member states that export a lot and certain member states that import a lot. Now, getting cost allocation right is critical. And that's where there'll be a lot of friction. And if we don't have the right governance structure in place, that friction will eventually break apart the whole thing, the whole construct. And I would very much like for us not to go there. Governance is key, but I think it would be naive of me not to say that in addition to governance, probably we might need to take a deeper dive, a deeper look into some structural change within the RTO as well. And by structural, I mean, you heard me say, I'm a fan of the RTO. I am absolutely a fan. But no one ever said that we couldn't change things when it comes to keeping a single market clearing price, of course, for reliability, but then also making changes where we look at certain other issues subregionally. Because our RTO is so very large and so very diverse, maybe subregionally, we look at things like transmission planning, we look at things like environment, energy efficiency, the things that we maybe would keep central are FTRs, day ahead and real-time markets, and back to central dispatch for reliability. That is what the RTO at its foundation was about.
Commissioner Dieters, you have about 30 seconds. Is that correct, Rob? 1 minute.
Well, I
No,
think
you've got a
the
full-
question was about state policies relieving the imbalances. Ohio just passed some aggressive incentives for natural gas generation and pipeline siting streamlining. So I think you'll see that coming from Ohio. To be determined, but it's there, and the state legislatures recognize the concerns about resource adequacy in our state. That's about all we can do, obviously, as a state, because we're connected to the market. But at this point in time, Ohio is importing, and a lot of the pressures on some of our older fossil generation from federal regulations have forced that, and I think that there's a consciousness now in the conversation that we need to maintain that dispatchable energy in Ohio. And other states are in the same boat and doing the same thing, specifically Pennsylvania.
Thank you very much, commissioners. That brings an end to this part.
Can I ask them a real quick follow?
Yep.
I want to ask Commissioner Dieters and Commissioner Barrow real quick. Would you like to see states in PJM have the same 205 rights that states in SPP have?
I would.
Yes.
And that brings an end to this session. We'll be back in 10 minutes with the Western Conference. Yeah,
All right, our next region that we're going to move on to is the Western, which covers a broad range, obviously. Let's say it's everything west of the Mississippi, which is going to include SPP, the non-RTO region.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity. Am I still on? It cut me off already.
I think you blew it out.
Yeah,
It wasn't me.
that,
Blew a transformer.
there you go. We know somebody here. to help.
You would think.
Well, I just really appreciate this opportunity and been learning a lot this morning from everyone and all the regions. And we don't have an RTO in the West, but we're learning more and more about it. And through this opportunity, we have. And just to kind of give you a little bit of quick background on the West, according to the Western Electricity Coordinating Council, we are resource adequate for a few more years. And that's only because of delayed retirements on our base load. Wildfire and unpredictable weather have really changed the way we have historically shared resources in the West. And of course, growth, inflation, artificial intelligence, data centers have really put an interesting and unique strain on our grid. And in a time when the West is transitioning from traditional baseload resources to more intermittent resources. And Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to share a prop map here. I don't know if it comes across too well on the cameras, but what that is the United States, and that red region is the West. And that red is everything that is owned by the federal government. And to say that the federal government is just another landowner in the West is like saying King Kong is just another monkey. And when we are having our issues, it's maybe appropriate that that red region is red because of red tape. And to give you a couple of examples of the governance challenges we are facing in the West is due to our enormous federal government land. When we think about some of the issues we've been experiencing, the one that comes to mind for me is the Boardman to Hemingway transmission line that stretches from Oregon into Idaho. It has been started the permitting process under the George W. Bush administration back in 2007, and it is still in the permitting process. That is a 300-mile line just between Oregon and Idaho. And the thing about we've had several different changes in administration, and an absolute yes when it comes to federal permitting, and an absolute no can be changed every 4 years. And an example of that is the Lava Ridge project, which was in the state of Idaho on BLM land. And it was yes one day and absolutely no the next, but change in administration. And in the Western states, in the meantime, we're the weebies. We be here when the administration begins, and we be here when the administration changes. But despite all that, there's a lot of good things happening in the West. We have imbalanced markets that are coming on, and they've had a lot of success. And we are very excited about the promise of the day ahead markets. We also have organizations like West Tech and the Western Transmission Consortium that are helping us with transmission planning and making a lot of progress on that as well. And helping us answer those questions is how we can get transmission built and who pays. And of course, we're very grateful to FERC and how good you've been to the West and allowing the West to be the West. And we have appreciated the respect you have for our structures, keeping the lines of communication open, and recognizing the flexible pathways that we are having and experiencing some success in the West. One of the greatest assets I think we have amongst the West is, even though Western states tend to align around political and policy structures, we know as commissioners, when we sometimes we let politics and policies between states get in the way, ultimately it's our customers that suffer and pay the price. So when I look about the opportunities in the West, I'm reminded of that famous poem by Robert Frost, The Mending Wall. And that's where we get that famous line, good fences mean good neighbors. And it's not about isolation. It's about harmony and respect. And I know that I'm a better commissioner in Idaho because I can pick up the phone and call Commissioner Rendall in Washington. And even though our states are politically different, we know that energy and resource adequacy is not a Republican problem or a Democrat problem. It's a common problem. And by working together and collaborating, communicating, and coordinating, we know that in the West, that's our greatest asset. And I liken it to the collaboration of a Western icon in the West, which is the American gray wolf. Wolves can be fine on their own, but they are more successful when they collaborate as a group, as a pack. And when it comes to our success or our future success in the West, it's going to be us working as a pack, communicating, collaborating, and coordinating. Because, Mr. Chairman, when you run with the wolves, you will learn how to howl. So I just appreciate this opportunity. Again, we're learning a lot. When we look at this structure, when we see what challenges we have with a federal governance structure, I think the question in the West is adding a regional transmission organization structure on top of this. Will that help or hurt us when we're trying to solve the great challenges we have in the West with resource adequacy and governance. So with that, I would like to hand it over to my co-commissioner here. Mr. O'Connell, do you have anything, Commissioner?
Well, great, thank you. And I put myself in the unenviable position of following the most interesting commissioner in the United States. But I also thank you for convening this group. As Commissioner Lodge said, it's a very active topic in the West of how regional organizations can benefit us all. We're deeply engaged in that. It's growing from kind of the ground up. RTOs are ultimately service providers, and so services are getting added one by one. Right now, I'd say there's active competition between service providers. As a commissioner, I'm trying to make sure that competition improves whatever happens and what we get there. And then just on score sheet, what is that resulting in? We had some states talking about how many organizations are involved in governance for New Mexico. We have the OG SPP, we have SPP's Western RTO, we have SPP's Markets Plus, we have EDAM, that is a service being provided out of California, the resource adequacy construct, which is again being built from the ground up by the vertically integrated utilities. So the thing I'm most interested with that is the old expression, the only cheese that's for free is in the mousetrap. And then we're also working on regional transmission planning through 1920. And then, as Commissioner Lodge said, the good news is that despite the very stark political differences across our states, as a group, we're working together. We also have a very able convener in the Western Interstate Energy Board. So delighted to be here today. We landed here in this conversation in a very interesting moment for the West. So looking forward to the conversation.
Let me ask you all to start off. I've been out West a lot. One of my themes is always what you all decide is what you all make the decision, what you want, what works for you. FERC shouldn't impose it, what works for you. But I've always had a hard time. I almost need a scorecard because you have so many acronym groups. Now in SPP, and Patrick, are you still the chair of the Regional State Committee?
Yeah, I'm the president of the RSC at ODSPP.
So I understand that part. But in the non-RTO West, I've always wondered, okay, where is the one place, or is there one place where the states in the non-RTO, I mean, SPP is easy, you got the RSC. In the non-RTO West, where do you all get together as states to actually promote your state interests? And I mean, because you got WEEB, you've got CREPC, you got YRAB, you got RAP for resource. I mean, you probably more accurate acronyms per square mile than any region I'm aware of. And after many years, I still can't figure out the one place where the states actually, get together qua states to talk about what is important. Is there one, or is it just sort of spread over these different acronyms?
Well, there is one that is 3 acronyms. Western Interstate Energy Board is WEEB, and they convene twice a year a conference called CREPC YRAB. So what
I've been to
that
that
is,
several times.
yeah. So CREPC is the organization of state regulators, and YRAB's the organization of state energy offices. So twice a year, those different groups come together to talk about important topics. And then, other one-off things like, Markets Plus, there's been a group that is working on that of state regulators. BOSER exists, that's Body of State Regulators out of that works with the California ISO, for example. And then, just the point I was making is that as small a state as New Mexico is, we're trying to make sure that we weigh in on all of those things. So to the point of regional organization, an argument for it is efficiency. It's not just economic efficiency, it's also just efficiency of regulators trying to do their work as a part of the attraction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think also we have the opportunity, I think it's for the first time, at least in a while, we're going to just be meeting as a group of state commissioners by ourselves this fall. And we're really looking for no one else in the room, just commissioners, so we can look across the room at each other and really have the conversations we really need to be having when it comes to addressing the challenges we have.
Is that going to be a new acronym, or is that just going to?
We're shopping for acronyms right now, Mr. Chairman. So if you have any suggestions, we'll take it.
Gray Wolf.
Gray Wolf, be a good.
Well, everyone is a Lobo.
Yeah, there you go. Nice.
Well, one thing, because I have to say with the RSC, one of the things I was sort of surprised to learn when I visited the RSC is you apparently, Patrick, don't meet alone as state regulators. You meet only in the context of an SPP meeting with all the room filled with all the different interest groups. And I would say it's as an OPSI veteran, those meetings where OPSI members go off and just talk among themselves are invaluable. And I didn't see that in SPP.
Yeah, that's right. We have started in that direction, starting with the last regional meeting in Omaha. We had an executive lunch session for just state regulators. That was very productive. We'll do that again in Kansas City. We're planning for Little Rock to also have a retreat just for the state regulators on the RSC. And I agree with you, Chair Christie, that's important. And it's something that we're working to improve at SPP. Commissioner Lodge talking about the convening in Scottsdale. I'm sure that won't be the last time. And I would bet, just because it's the first one, we're going to find a list of topics where we need to have intentional meetings of regulators.
Yeah, if I was going to give two pieces of advice for any state organization, it would be number one, you have to have an organization where the state regulators can go off on their own and talk among themselves without the room full of lobbyists and everybody else. And RTO reps, it has to be the ability to talk among yourselves. The second thing I would add is you have to have your own staff. You don't have staff at your agencies that can do all this. As Catherine mentioned, the demands are incredible. And so to have an effective state organization at an RTO level, or a non-RTO West even, I think those two criteria are absolutely essential. And that's governance. I mean, that's absolutely governance, is the processes by which states regulators talk to themselves and are supported and have staff support. Absolutely. I don't see any other tent cards up. Anybody? Oh, yeah. Mr.
I always have a question. Thank you. So I think really fundamentally what it comes down to is how I'm curious about what you're trying to figure out in the West is really how to get the benefits of the regional coordination and planning that we see in RTOs without those inefficiencies that are caused by the governance structures in some of the RTOs that exist now. How are you thinking about that? Like, what is the what are you trying to protect against? How are you thinking about that from the West perspective?
I'll go ahead and take a shot at that, and then I think that I'd love to hear Commissioner Lodge's point of view. Again, as in the West, these services have grown up on more or less an ad hoc basis. From where I'm at, Desert Southwest region, there's a thing called Southwest Reserve Sharing Group. And so that was akin to a power pool. The states across, New Mexico, Arizona, Southern Nevada kind of share electrically a region. So those are the kind of things that have always existed out West. Looking across, we do have a significant ISO, Cal ISO, and looking, the experience at SPP, if we could get to a more efficient market, costs will come down for our customers. I mean, to Commissioner Barrow's point, we have exporters and importers. My state is an exporter of the lowest cost resource, the wind and the solar, but you can't have wind and solar all the time. So you want to have that interaction with the region for cost and reliability reasons. So again, then Western tradition is let's build up from the bottom. And so we've been taking incremental steps. First step was energy imbalance markets. We're on the precipice of the next big step on an economic benefit of the day ahead market. Will we get to RTO for regional transmission planning, or probably even more problematic is operation of the transmission system. We'll see. This is just my personal take on how we're at where we're at is when you're obtaining services, who do you trust? So we've got an ISO that's offering services, and then the ISO is designed to serve the state that it exists in. And then we have an RTO coming to offer services. And so I think different groups are choosing based on that. Personally, I'm a signatory on the pathways letter. And so I want to get to where we have the most efficient solution. So that would be the market that has the most diversity, the deepest pool of resources. But then you're running into that fault line of who do you trust to manage that market? So anyway, good news as a regulator, that's creating competition. I think you'll see Markets Plus is different than SPP. You'll see the EDAM's already improved because of the Pathways Initiative, and there's hopefully more improvement on offer there. So open question, where are we going to get to? But what's propelling the action is let's take the next step for efficiency, and why, for all the reasons Commissioner Lodge said. We've got wildfire risk. You know, if power lines get wiped out in the west, it affects all of us, not just the state where the line got wiped out. Resource adequacy, New Mexico, number 5 state in area, but something like number 38 in population. So we're going to supply way more energy than we're ever going to use, but that's wind and solar. So to help back that up, it'd be nice to have a market where we can import. So those are the things that are propelling the need for improvement. Western tradition, we're going to measure 5 times and cut once.
Okay, so one of the comments that you made, Commissioner Lodge, about that essentially we take care of ourselves, but we work as a group as well. Individually, how would you characterize the reserve margins in the states? You're taking care of yourself. One of the advantages that you get from an RTO, or one hopes to get from an RTO, is sharing is better. And those reserve margins are set in a way that minimizes overbuild, but at the same time provides resource adequacy when needed. How would you characterize it in the West?
What I can, let me start by maybe, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, to kind of take it from an Idaho perspective. There was a time in Idaho we had enough power to go around. We have 60% of our energy comes from hydro, from the Hells Canyon Dam complex. And the rest of it will come from natural gas from outside the state. And there was a time when we were sufficient, but Idaho is the fastest growing state. And because of that, our utilities are some of the fastest growing utilities in the nation. So we are very dependent on the good, our neighbors in Wyoming and Utah and others that help us out to make sure we have enough resources for our customers, or for the ratepayers, and for our growing economies. But I can tell you there have been some close calls. In January of 2024, we had a weather event in the Pacific Northwest that really strained the grid and our system. We had some pre-planned maintenance on some baseload facilities, and we were coming up short. And if it hadn't, the truth of the matter is, it hadn't been for solar resources out of California, we would have had brownouts in the state of Idaho. So when push comes to shove, at this point in time, we are able to rely on resources from other parts of the region. However, the challenge is we grow, and the more we're going to be needing regionally, because the whole West is growing and facing similar challenges, coordinating and working together and building those important transmission lines, which are like the highways and byways of selling goods to each other, need to be improved. And we're working with a lot of entities, as I said, not just states, but the federal government as well. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're at time. We may have 30 seconds. Pat, is it, Commissioner O'Connell, anything you would want to add in conclusion?
Well, I'll just follow up on that resource adequacy question because, Commissioner, you and I were at the Resource Adequacy Technical Conference in DC, and one of the fascinating takeaways for that on me is really the question is, will supply meet demand? And then at what cost? And then resource adequacy is just this construct as regulators we build. So there's a factor of safety on the answer to that question, right? So who's building the construct can have huge impacts on what's it going to cost. So that's kind of, for me, the big regional governance question.
Thank you very much for the West. Now we're going to move to CRUG, okay? We have two brand new participants, and so we've allotted additional time for introductions. Commissioner Pasadoma Smith is taking over for Commissioner Art Graham, who has been nominated by the president to be on the TVA board. I'll turn it over to you, Gabriella, and then Chris, if you would mind introducing yourselves and making comments simultaneously. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chair Houston. So my name's Gabriella. I have been on the PSC since 2021. I originally filled former Commissioner Julie Brown's seat, and then went up for reappointment in my own term the following year. So that was a busy year, and I had a year to prove myself. Thankfully, I did, to the extent that Governor DeSantis appointed me again. I was at the commission prior to my appointment. I was an attorney there for several years. So I just moved down the hall. So that was easy. And it was a good experience, especially just in understanding how the agency worked, and being able to just the nuances and knowing the staff and who to rely on. I think it's already been mentioned about how important it is to have a very robust staff, both on the technical and the legal side. And I'm very proud of our staff in Florida. I think they do an amazing job, and are a great resource for me as I'm learning things. I won't go too much. Yeah, that's basically my background. I'll turn to Chair Brown to give his introduction.
Thank you very much. Yes, we're the newbies. So number one, thank y'all for having this. It's we're learning a lot. So from everybody here, we always see these conferences as a way to learn. And so a little bit about me. I'm chairman of the Mississippi Public Service Commission. I was in the legislature for 12 years, so I'm a recovering legislator. And I've been in this position for about a year and a half, so I'm a reluctant regulator now, but learning a lot. In my House experience, I was a Medicaid chair, so I thought nobody could have any more acronyms than the medical industry until this. So Commissioner Lodge, just the longer the acronyms, the better. So just make it like, if you can get to 12 or 15, that'd be amazing. So it is a very, very important task. And so I know our commission is very concerned, just like everybody here, about base load and how we're going to supply the energy for the future. And so we have more questions than we have answers, but we're glad to be part of the process and to learn from everybody here.
I go into
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So I guess I'm going to this is going to be a very different perspective than what I've heard around the table as far as Florida. We are not part of an RTO, and we have no interest in joining one. Not to, I've heard a lot of really great things about them. It sounds like there's a lot of collaboration that happens, and it's mostly, I think, predominantly due to our geographic situation in Florida. We are a peninsular state. And with that means that we have physical constraints about our import capacity. So because of that, our utilities are very forward thinking as far as the IRP process and making sure that we have adequate resources during all types of events. Obviously, probably the biggest characteristic of our state is hurricanes and hurricane preparedness and storm resiliency. I think that our state has a pretty phenomenal job in that regard. We've been usually quite a leader as far as storm resiliency is concerned, and that's just, we've had a long time to learn a lot and a lot of practice. So we the way that our resource IRP process works, we call it a 10-year site plan. Each year, the utilities bring to us their 10-year planning horizon, and we approve it or disapprove, approve with modification. But within that, um, it's very detailed. It's long term. And ensures sufficient generation capacity and reliability. Embedded in that is that we, talking about reserve margins, we have a pretty high bar. All of our utilities are typically maintain above a 20% reserve margin, so it ensures adequate supply without that external dependence. So another reason why we can kind of keep that reliability within our own state control. High degree of vertical integration. All our utilities are highly regulated by us, the PSC. So they are not don't need to be reliant on regional markets. They can kind of control and know their generation assets and when and where to deploy them and work within the state. I am included in this clear line of accountability. Everything that our investor-owned utilities do, for the most part, we give. They lead, but everything is checked by us, our staff and the commissioners. We have a good working relationship with the utilities. I think it's worked really well. And as a kind of demonstration of that, we have a very strong reliability track record. To date, we really have not experienced major systematic reliability failures that would ever, necessitate a regional backup. The 2024 NERC Summer Reliability Assessment concluded that the Florida region expected to have sufficient resources to meet peak demand under normal and extreme conditions. So we're adequately prepared without the need to join the RTOs. I've definitely learned a lot from this group and about the process. We Chair Brown and I were just talking about some of the certification, the 205 requirement. I didn't even know what those were. We don't really handle that, but I think it's important for us, just because we don't want to be necessarily joining. I think we are adequately supplied, but that we need to, one, have a voice at this table. So thank you very much for inviting me to take Art's place, and to, express our position, but also to understand how the rest of the country is operating, because things can change. We are, like anybody else is saying, seeing such a dramatic transition of resources and the renewables that we're bringing on, and so it's important that we are able to adapt if need be, and understand that what the rest of the country is doing if at some point those more import is needed. But as of now, we are staying the course. I'll turn it over to Chair Brown now.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up?
Yes, sir.
I don't believe you're in CERTEP either, right?
No, sir.
Your transmission planning is totally within
the Florida, Electric Reliability Coordinating Council.
Thank you, Commissioner. Like we stated earlier, a lot of us are concerned about again, in reference to the governance, and it's been stated here before, the loss of state authority and local control, especially in generation in our own state, and then possible load sharing orders and things like that are very concerning. Federal decision making and RTO undermines state sovereignty. That's a part of the governance part that a lot of our states are very concerned about. Simple questions like when our RTO issues a project, and that project is being built and it overruns, who is overseeing those projects that are issued by the RTOs? Does FERC oversee them, or does somebody else oversee those projects? We don't, of course, we cannot have any impact or any say over those projects once they're issued or given out by the RTO. So how does all that work going forward in the governance? Also, as we're connected in the RTO, there's some of the states will have policies that can be disruptive to the market. So we're starting to see some divergence in policy between some of the states that are involved in the RTO, which causes some stress that it's going to add to the cost and hurt the resiliency of the whole. Again, goes back to governance at that point. That also goes to the grid reliability, whether it's renewables or whether it's baseload dispatchable generation. How much is there? How much is too much? And how do we distribute it? If some states or region in the RTO goes down one path, and there's a lack of generation, then we're all responsible, or it can be issued load shedding, so where we can have rolling brownouts based on those things. Also, some of the unaccountable bureaucracy. RTOs are not directly accountable to the voters, ratepayers, or state governments. So that creates kind of a little bit of anxiety for some of us going forward. And how much input and voice do we have in the direction of the RTOs? And again, that our task was to, again, ask the questions to try to find the answers, and what is the future of RTOs for the member states, especially in ours. We're a member of MISO. So just trying to understand how we go forward together with some of the challenges that we have as states that are members that may be going in divergent paths on generation.
Well, you've got to hear a lot of problems articulated today. How does that leave you feeling with your states?
Makes me want to throw some acronyms. No. So, and again, that question, do we know who does regulate those RTO projects? Does FERC oversee those projects to make sure there's no overruns and when the overruns are there, of course, it just goes into, it's just distributed amongst the members of the RTO.
We probably ought to clarify, you're in MISO South.
Yes, sir.
People don't follow the geography. MISO's really big.
Yes, sir. Sorry. Yeah, MISO South.
Are there governance changes you'd like to see?
Beg pardon?
Are there governance changes you'd like to see? The topic of today.
Still, I'm sorry.
Are there governance changes you'd like to see? That's the topic of today, the governance.
Yes.
And are there?
That more input in that, how do we have input in those decisions? How do we oversee to make sure those costs or those overruns don't penalize our ratepayers and as a member of the RTO? And so I can speak from my state particularly. It's not a very wealthy state, so we do look at the cost to those ratepayers as we take that very seriously, and the fact that the costs go up, it impacts our people a lot in the MISO South, a little heavier than it does in other member states.
And I'd also say, I mean, you're right, Chair Houston. There was issues that were brought up, but I did hear a lot of solutions that are already being implemented, as well as good suggestions. I think Chair Bartlett was the one who said about adding a lot more transparency in as far as a potential planning advisory committee or something like that. Agreed with Chair Brown. We are always so cognizant of the end, cost for consumers at the end of the day. Like, that is real safe, reliable, and affordable power is really what we are always is always our objective. So when you don't have, and we, even in a state like ours that's highly regulated, vertically integrated, there's there's as much transparency. I think we can always, there's always more to be had, but there's still complaints about that. So if you have a unelected board that has such a thumb on price control, how does that impact consumers at the end of the day? Do they have a voice? And that's something that we're super cognizant of. I think everyone here is really making great strides in addressing that issue, because obviously cost is something that we're all grappling with and we all are accountable to. So it's not all doom and gloom. I think that there's been a lot of a lot of progress that is already, and good suggestions I've already heard today. So
And as far as governance changes, that to answer that more directly, more state involvement, not just advisory, but decisional, that we have some input on on the decisions, not just in advisory.
Well, I'm going to just state the obvious for those involved in vertically integrated states. I mean, Indiana is very similar to other states around the country. Statutorily, we have a consumer counselor's office that is by law there to represent ratepayers at all proceedings. And so for a state like Florida, who's taking care of everything, that kind of input and what Chair Brown is talking about in terms of overseeing the actual outcome of overruns, or you've got somebody in the room who's participating before you as commissioners, whose job it is to look out for that consumer interest. That's kind of a dual role, as I understand it from FERC. You don't typically have a consumer counselor, but you have that responsibility for balancing what's just and reasonable at the same time. And so that goes to governance, it goes to accountability, and ultimate decision-making.
You're right. I mean, there's no consumer advocate at FERC. Never has been.
Questions from the panel?
I know we're kind of in a unique situation.
Well,
so
I will say this, and even though the Florida is the Sunshine State,
Mhm.
this past February, I believe I got pictures from my in-laws
We
who
got-
live in Destin, Florida, with 6 inches of snow in their backyard and on their roofs.
Yeah.
So it's not completely undone.
No, I mean, no, there is a winter peak. It hits, I mean, I'm from South Florida, so that never affected, but now that I live in Tallahassee, I woke up to my whole yard covered in snow, and it was definitely something I was not prepared for. But thankfully, our utilities actually were. So yeah, we were able to stabilize pretty quickly after that.
Questions from the panel? Thank you very much. I think we can go to closing remarks.
We can.
You want to go ahead and start?
I think it's a great discussion, fascinating. I enjoyed hearing from all the different regions, and each, mostly RTO regions, but we also have non-RTO regions with a perspective like Gabriella and Idaho. Absolutely. It's ultimately a state decision whether you choose to RTO or not. And as to the decision to be made by as a state. But what's interesting just to hear from the different RTOs, and there's sort of a common theme of states need more role. I think that was pretty common across all the RTOs. But the details matter, and the details are really different. I mean, I look in New England, and I've always been fascinated by that jump ball process, and that NESCO's role and your all's role, which is unique. SPPs, the RSC that Patrick chairs is unique. You got that from the beginning of SPP. Kim and Dennis know that in PJM, probably the states have the least role of all in terms of authority in the biggest RTO. But it all goes back to history. I know SPP, the states demanded that role before SPP was certified under Order 2000. And PJM, it just sort of happened incrementally. You started with the big three, the P and the J and the M, and then kept adding on, and there wasn't any moment of creation, really. It was just sort of the long history, and no one, I guess, I know in Virginia, when we were looking at going into PJM, we really weren't even thinking in terms of, first of all, we didn't really know, you know, you didn't know the implications of the governance and how that was going to affect our consumers over time and our state over time. So it's been a long process of education, but interesting discussion. Absolutely.
Well, I just want to say thank you to all the members of FERC for participating in this and coming in from your homes in the DC area to both out to Anaheim, California last fall, to inviting us to your offices for the April meeting and to conclude this particular iteration of the collaborative here in Boston. Thank you very much. And your teams have done a wonderful job. Where's Cal? Is he out there? No, I'm going to do a commercial for Cal. He does a good job too.
He does.
But thank you very much, commissioners, for all your support of this, because as I've mentioned many, many times before, we are living through this dynamic period of change. The amount of our economy that's going to depend on electric generation is the basic fundamental of civilization. And for us to succeed as a nation, we got to get it right. We have to do it right from a cost allocation perspective. We have to do it right based on what's right for the customer and cost causers as well. And so I can't think of a better way to bring these issues together than in this NARUC FERC collaborative situation. The issue started as gas electric coordination last fall. It didn't conclude at that point in time, but just took a little bit of a turn. Don't know what succeeding iterations there may be for this, but obviously I wish the best for everybody in continuing this collaborative into the future. And once again, if you would join me in showing our appreciation to Mark Christie for his contribution.
Thank you. And I want to thank Chairman Houston. He is actually finishing up his term on the Indiana Commission, I think in January. So let's thank him for all his great service to Indiana.
Cece, is there anything legal that we got to do to conclude?
We're adjourned.